The Blue Economy Conference in Nairobi enters its second Chinese market. Mr. Pravin Gordhan protest out. His words with journalists at that process outside the Zondo Commission hearings. But how long is this pattern of
attacked and UNECA to better inform decision-making of African states?
We really need to raise the awareness of the possibilities, the future possibilities of the marine mineral industry for African countries. And the second part of the project is capacity building. It's extremely important to improve the capacity of African states, both the human and technological capacity to manage a future marine minerals industry, and to build capacity amongst, for example, government officials, ocean scientists, oceanographers, and others who might be involved in this future industry.
The need for a radical vision that values communities and livelihoods may be that starting point that African cities need to jumpstart their blue economies. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
All right then, quite a few corporate headlines to get through. Let's start with South African Airways. It apparently needs $540 million from next month to fund day-to-day operations right into 2019. In a presentation to a parliamentary committee on Tuesday, the cash-strapped carrier showed an austerity plan that includes job cuts and a reduction of routes in order to return to profitability by 2021. SAA has not generated a profit since 2011. It survives right now on handouts from taxpayers. Lenders have also refused to extend a $254 million loan unless they get additional guarantees from the state. Rio Tinto will be selling a 69% stake in a Namibian uranium mine to China National Uranium Corporation for the sum of $106.5 million. China is seeking to bolster supplies, and Rio is offloading less profitable assets from its portfolio. China is targeting nuclear power as an alternative to fossil fuels. It already owns stakes in Namibian uranium production. Rossing is the world's longest-running open-pit uranium mine. It's been operating since 1976. It's produced more uranium than any other mine. The retailer Carrefour and the unicorn Jumia have announced a new partnership that will see Carrefour products sold on Jumia's online platform. Now, that partnership will initially just focus on a couple of countries, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon and Senegal, where both groups are present. Through this partnership, customers will be able to get Carrefour products delivered directly to their homes. And finally, Africa's largest telecommunications group, MTN, says it is looking for a way to resolve a dispute with Ghana's telecommunications regulator. The company has been fined $1.8 million for not providing good quality service. Ghana's National Communications Authority accuses MTN, Vodafone, Airtel, Tigo and Glo of not meeting required service standards. All of them were fined $7 million last week. That's a run through your company headlines. We're 15 minutes into the hour. You're still watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. We'll be taking a look at Egypt's domestic aviation industry and how much damage plastics are doing to South Africa's marine ecosystems. All that and more is in the pipeline.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction. action on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra Naidu. Hello, Naidu.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. China and Algeria have signed an agreement to build the largest phosphate mine in Africa. It's a $6 billion project. It heralds a new era in Algeria's industrialization ambition, and it's also a rather large step forward in diversifying the economy away from its dependence on oil and gas. The project has been hailed as an indicator of strong bilateral ties between the two sides. Sonatrach, that's Algeria's state-owned oil company, Asmid Al Manal Groups and China's CITIC company will jointly develop the project. Once it's done, target date is 2022. It's estimated that it will create about 14,000 jobs in the region and lift Algeria's phosphate output from 1 million tons to 10 million every year.
We see in this huge project, within the context of the Algerian-Chinese bilateral relations, a significant qualitative leap, since the two countries are moving from the stage of completion agreements to the stage of real economic partnerships in the framework of a big and very important operation.
This project is very constructive as a project of production capacity, cooperation between China and Algeria, under the Belt and Road Initiative of President Xi. It will bring huge benefits to Algeria in terms of diversification of industry. I think it will help a lot in Algeria's efforts to shift from hydrocarbon-dependent economy.
After years of manufacturing Chinese-designed training jets, Egypt's state-owned aircraft factory is now looking for contracts and businesses to grow domestic output. The factory was originally designed to build Egyptian fighter jets, but economic challenges forced it to look for markets outside the country. Here's CGTN's Adel Mahrouki with more.
Egypt founded this factory in 1950, aiming to build locally designed fighter jets. Engineers produced 5 warplanes, one of them supersonic. But wars against Israel, France and Britain grounded the ambitious project. The factory shifted to manufacturing spare parts, partnering with international companies to assemble their aircraft. Its most prized model was China's K-8E training jet.
They are very good planes. They assist ground troops in combat as the jet is capable of carrying rockets. Air Force graduates must master this craft before moving on to the F-16 Rafale or Mirage 2000. In partnership with China, we've produced 120 of these jets. The domestic share of the manufacturing grew until it reached 95% of the plane's structure.
Collaboration on the Chinese jets has led to stronger cooperation between the two countries.
We have excellent relations with China in the aviation industry. We hold joint conferences and exchange skills and experiences annually. Both sides are keen to add to each other's knowledge base and play a role in manufacturing aircraft.
The contract for the K-8E training jets expired in 2010, and since then, the factory has been focused on maintenance. It currently produces spare parts for the Air Force's fleet.
I hope that we can secure more civil manufacturing contracts to make use of the huge supply of manpower and skills we have in the factory. We plan to play a role in building a new model that can be used by the Egyptian Air Force and be marketed to Arab countries and beyond.
With its budget deficit and struggling economy, the government can't afford to fund such an ambitious plan. So until then, the factory will be used purely to revamp older aircrafts. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Many parts of Africa are at risk of experiencing pretty severe effects of climate change. In Malawi, for example, rising temperatures coupled with deforestation are causing water bodies to dry up, and that's threatening fishing and all the livelihoods that depend on it.
Just 4 months earlier, the fishing harbour at Kachulu on the western shores of Lake Chilwa in Malawi was bustling with fishermen and traders. Presently, hundreds of fishing boats sit marooned on cracked dry mud as vultures fly overhead.
I ferry people from Chizzy Island to Kachulu, but the drying up at the lake has pushed my colleagues and me out of business. At the moment, we have no source of income because of this problem.
The drying up of the lake has put us in an awkward situation. We had a good fish market. Now we are idle because there is no fish. I am here just to look after these facilities, hoping that the lake will recover.
Chilwa, the country's second largest lake after Lake Malawi, is shallow and silent, and particularly prone to seasonal variations in water levels. The last time it got so dry was during a drought in 1991.
Climate change contributes to the current recessions that we are experiencing. Because you can see that in 2012 there was a recession where the lake lost about 80% of its water. Then it recovered in 2013, but not fully. So since then, every year we've been experiencing these recessions.
1.5 million people live around the Lake Chilwa Basin, which is one of the most densely populated areas in southern Africa. The lake is a key source of livelihood for area residents.
Before the lake dried up, I was able to make 5,000 kwacha or more per day. Now we have no business because of what has happened to the lake.
The lake once provided about 30% of the country's fish and is home to nearly 200 unique waterbird species. Records show it has dried completely several times in the last 100 years, with every dry spell longer than the previous one. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
In South Africa now, environmentalists are issuing a very stark warning over the increasing amount of marine pollution in the country. Plastic pollution, in particular, is a huge problem there, with more than 51 trillion pieces of microplastics said to be currently floating about somewhere in the ocean. CGTN's Travis Andrews found this report.
Marine plastic pollution is one of the most pressing environmental issues facing the globe. In Cape Town, the situation is being compounded by the drought, which has led to some parts of the coastline looking like this, an underwater dump site. Animals are dying due to plastic pollution, and no more so than the Cape seabirds, who have seen an increased mortality rate due to the entanglement, microplastics ingestion, and the bioaccumulation of toxins in their systems. Now the city wants to put a stop to the amount of animals perishing, and is looking at cracking down on errant polluters.
It is a priority program on the city's agenda in terms of reducing the impact of plastic pollution, but also controlling it at the source. In other words, not letting it into the distribution channels like the river systems, which flush it out into the sea, and all of those kind of mechanisms.
The problem, though, is hard to police, as a significant amount of plastic has arisen from the drought and eventually does make it back into the sea. Seabirds such as seagulls, cormorants, and even penguins are increasingly ending up at rehabilitation centers, SANCOB, for life-saving treatment. But it's also errant human behavior coupled with plastic debris that is compounding the problem.
One of the areas where we do see a lot of serious injuries, for example, is with fishing line. You know, fishing line is a major problem, that it gets caught up in the on the legs of the birds or in the wings. Or, for example, they swallow a hook, and then the hook obviously causes a lot of damage, and the fishing line gets entangled. So that causes a lot of deaths in the seabirds that we see or that we hear about.
Up to 80% of all litter in the ocean is made of plastic, and various forms of marine life have some interaction with plastics in some form, which can never be a good thing. Other marine life, such as fish, are also ingesting plastics in the ocean. And that means seabirds that feed on fish are now twice as prone to succumb to its harmful effects. Of the 300 million tons of plastics that are produced globally every year, only around 14% is recycled. And it's not just plastic bags and water bottles that are the potential killers, they get a lot smaller than that as well.
The other way it can do is the little microplastics nowadays, so those can also get absorbed. And that plastic over there, the toxins from that plastic can be absorbed into the system or into the body basically, and cause the death of the bird that way.
The plight of the seabirds, though, have been highlighted through social media campaigns, beach cleanups and penguin releases. But a lot more needs to be done so that the mother city can finally begin to rid itself of those harmful plastics. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Time for another break on the program. Here's what's coming up next. The US president is bitterly opposed to plans by General Motors to cut jobs. And we'll be looking at the task ahead for G20 leaders on a meeting in Argentina later in the week.
Agenda 2063 cannot move without the people.
Your stories.
Welcome to Africa Live. The President and the Minister said a whole lot of things last year, but we need to actually see those things happening.
Your views.
One way to get us out of that poverty is give free education to all girls who cannot afford to pay.
Your voice.
We hope that we can get back on.
Africa Live. We've got you covered.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realized that
emerging market nation. Subsequent
of this area of science is full of potential discussion, morally and
with Brent.
2018, he decided to venture into the Chinese market due to strong demand.
We have large quantity of cassava that we're trying to see how we can take the opportunity of the expo. We are trying to do now is to see how we can do very large exportation of cassava related items to China and in turn get exchange of probably, like for example, arming to export processing.
The China International Import Expo demonstrates China's determination to further expand imports. It has provided a platform for Nigerian cassava processors and farmers to engage with Chinese stakeholders in cultivation and processing.
I hope to take the opportunity of the next coming expo, particularly that of China, for us to see how Nigerian can benefit from the largesse they have given to the country vis-a-vis cassava related product among other products that are open.
Nigerian economists say that the Nigerian cassava industry could seize the opportunities brought by the expo to promote the development of Nigeria's economy.
I believe it's about China trying to open the doors to welcome more business collaboration, develop the rural people on varieties of cassava that meets the demand of what the Chinese want. It's going to be a very big opportunity for us to embrace, and it will trickle down, solve a lot of unemployment amongst the youths in Nigeria, because the value chain of cassava is huge.
Nigeria is rich in cassava because of its natural environment. The annual output for cassava in Nigeria is more than 50 million tons, and it's currently the world's largest producer of cassava. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Egyptian movie stars and filmmakers are quite proud of this year's edition of the Cairo International Film Festival. The 8-day event included an expanded list of awards to attract a much wider audience. CGTN's Adel Mahrouki was on the red carpet.
It holds the same name, yet it looks completely different this year. More elegant, a glamorous setup design, and more prestigious, standing up to its long history. After years of abandonment, famous movie stars and filmmakers are once again attracted to the Cairo International Film Festival. 60 countries are participating this year, With 160 films in numerous competitions the festival is holding this year.
I am very happy with this edition. I love all the activities this year. There's a huge number of audience. There are good lectures. There was a marvelous experience I had 2 days ago. A display of the newest cinema technology and filming gears. This is all a great addition to this festival.
Cairo is marking the 40th edition of one of the biggest and oldest film festivals in Africa. A special exhibition extends throughout the week-long event, recording the history of the festival.
I think it's a very good edition. It looks totally different. A 100% makeover. It's now unequal to all international film festivals. We still need to work on the content. We need to attract global films to premiere in the Cairo Film Festival.
One of the new creations in this edition is an audience award. It's a $20,000 prize given to the most voted for film out of the 16 productions in the main competition in an attempt to engage more of Cairo's audience with the festival.
The main purpose of the audience award is to encourage distribution and display of films which the audience prefers. They will vote using a trending Chinese mobile application called TikTok. The prize will be split between the producer and the local distributor of the film. So if a foreign film is chosen, we can fund screening it on as many screens as possible.
With the new and young management, the festival is offering a variety of events to its visitors, from a critics' week to Arab cinema discussions and opportunities to engage with global filmmakers. The events of the 40th Cairo International Film Festival extend until Thursday, November 29. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
I really love this next story. It took 6 months to get there, 6 months, but NASA's InSight spacecraft is now resting comfortably, getting to work on the surface of Mars. The spacecraft will also be conducting geological scientific exploration that could tell scientists a lot more about the history of the Earth and one of our closer planets. CGTN's Hendrickson Brandy has more.
The rest of the vehicle has to turn.
At Lockheed Martin, the builders of the InSight spacecraft, employees and their families gathered for a Mars landing that's never automatic. The success rate for such endeavors over the years is just 40%.
Landing on Mars is very hard. We've done everything we can prepare the team, prepare the spacecraft, but now we need a little bit of luck on our side as well.
3,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's a complex but risky process where all kinds of things can go wrong. The spacecraft, out of touch with Earth, slowed from 21,000 kilometers per hour when it hit Mars's atmosphere to 0 at the surface 7 minutes later.
It's the 7 minutes of terror.
17 meters, standing by for touchdown.
A pair of small satellites tracked InSight all the way down to the planet.
Touchdown confirmed.
The feat was celebrated here in Colorado and a Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, which is in charge of a mission that began 6 months and nearly 500 million kilometers ago. The landing complete, attention now turns to the science this three-legged geologist will perform. This is a very different kind of Mars mission. The focus over the next 2 Earth years won't be on the surface of the planet so much as what lies deep inside. Using a robotic arm, InSight will deploy a high-tech seismometer built by the French Space Agency to listen for Martian earthquakes, as well as a self-hammering nail with heat sensors built by the German Space Agency that will dig 5 meters below the surface to gauge the planet's internal temperature, all to better understand a place that's been much less geologically active than Earth.
On Mars, all those things that were formed in the first few tens of millions of years after formation are still frozen in place. And so we can basically use Mars as a time machine to go back and look at what the Earth must have looked like a few tens of millions of years after it formed.
So we're trying to understand that connection. We're trying to understand a body that's smaller, a body that, although was formed 4.5 billion years ago along with Earth, it is formed differently.
Information gathered during this mission could be useful when humans travel to the planet in the future. Shortly after the landing, InSight beamed back this photo. It will take several months for the spacecraft to deploy its science instruments. Then, for those who've long wanted to dig deeply into Mars, the real fun begins. Henrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Littleton, Colorado.
Pretty impressive stuff. Now we just wait for the James Webb Telescope to go up to start looking at the sun. Quick run through some currencies here for you. As had been widely forecast on the monetary policy side, Kenya's central bank really didn't change its policy rate. It's retained it at 9%, no questions asked. The more interesting comments covered other issues. Private sector credit growth up 4.4% in the 12 months to October, rising by about 50 basis points compared to a month before. Still well under inflation though, that's running at about 5%, so you do the math. Although November's data for inflation that's coming out later this week, Friday, non-performing loans though still pretty high, 12.3% is the number we're looking at. Those are your currencies, and this has been this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways of getting your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.